Good morning, YouTube. Welcome back to the channel. Today, I have a question for everyone. Who wants to create some chaos? For some players, rather than simply jamming our spells and settling for the mundane things happening in our games of Magic, we like to toss a little bit of creative catastrophe at our opponents and shake things up. That's where Neera Wild Mage comes in. For 4 colorless, a blue, and a red, you get a 2/7 human elf shaman that says whenever you cast a spell, you may put it on the bottom of its owner's library, and if you do, reveal cards from the top until you reveal a non-land card, and you may cast the card without paying its mana cost, and then put the rest of the cards revealed on the bottom of the deck in a random order. This only triggers once per turn. For those of you out there that think that was a big mouthful of words, what does this card really do? What it does is every time you cast a spell, you can decide to toss it on the bottom of your deck and substitute whatever you run into next off the top of your library to cast instead. This operates very similarly to one of my favorite enchantments in Magic, Possibility Storm. But there's a couple of differences with the spell. You can choose to ignore the trigger on Neera and it hits whatever is next on the top of the deck that's a non-land spell, whereas Possibility Storm, you look at all the card types that are on the card, you pick one of them, and then you have to do it. It's not an optional thing. And then you just flip through until you hit one of the card types that are on there that you picked, and that's what you run into. Another difference of Neera versus the Storm is that Possibility Storm only triggers off a spell cast from your hand because it says it right on the card. Whereas Neera has no such restriction, so spells that are cast from exile or from the graveyard will also trigger her ability. So, to paraphrase the Joker in The Dark Knight, how are we going to introduce a little anarchy into this? How about we start with Chaos Warp? Basically, it's one of the best removal spells in the game for red, and it quote-unquote solves everything in the format that you want to hit, but it has a caveat, whereas you're going to take a huge gamble playing Chaos Magic, and you might flip that same card right off your opponent's deck again, but it can hit things that you can't normally hit with red magic, enchantments, so it's pretty useful. Or how about the aforementioned Possibility Storm? It's more randomness, and it will also trigger even if you are not exiling a spell to its ability. Don't believe me? Check out the rulings on the Gatherer. It says right on there, even if you do not exile a spell to its trigger, it will still let you flip cards. So you just have to go ahead and stack the trigger correctly with Neera and have her be the one that exiles, because she says right on her that you must exile the spell in order to get her trigger to work. And then you resolve the Possibility Storm trigger. Or how about Sunbird Invocation? It's a pseudo cascade, random possibilities, and it doesn't get much more chaotic than that. Or how about Stolen Strategy? Dealing your opponent's stuff every turn and being able to cast it for yourself not only gives you things to do, it also messes up your opponent's game plan, because you might take out some of their win cons just by sheer accident of exiling it with this enchantment on the board. A new one that I hadn't realized was printed because it was done in Strixhaven, but I'm just learning about it. Creative Technique. It's chaos with a political twist. Normally you get a one shot at some of this stuff, but you can copy this one using its demonstrate ability. But it's kind of a one shot Mind's Desire. So you can start flipping cards off your deck until you hit something non-land, but if you decide to demonstrate, you can let an opponent use it as well. But it's nice because then you can use it either as, let's gift something to the person that's furthest behind something for free, or you can get someone off your back as a political play, like, okay, this person's messing with you, I'll give you a copy of this if you quit screwing with me for a couple of turns. Or you just further your chaotic ambitions and just say screw it and just go crazy. Another card in the Chaos realm I like is Dreamshaper Shaman. You sack some of your early stuff like your mana rocks and stuff, and then you can flip over bigger things, bigger spells, just fun things to screw with the board. Another good one is Reality Scramble. It's basically a repeatable Chaos Warp for your own stuff. So say you want to dig for an artifact to mess with the game, like Teferi's Puzzle Box, more on that one later in the video, scramble your mana rocks and try to hit it. Then we have Shifting Shadow, which is basically a constant polymorph every upkeep for a creature. So you enchant your creature, you swing with it, next upkeep, you basically pull the slot machine lever and you try to score a bigger monster off of whatever you had enchanted, and then the enchantment goes on the new monster, gives it haste, and then you swing again and you just keep going. As long as it doesn't die in combat, you just keep polymorphing away basically every turn into something else. And then, as mentioned before, Teferi's Puzzle Box. I mentioned this one a little bit ago. You really want to screw with your opponent's game plans. This thing is what you drop onto the board, and you're likely going to get a chorus of groans in response because it forces your opponents to be able to only plan for one turn at a time, because every beginning of draw step, they'll draw a card, and then that entire hand goes on the bottom of their deck, and they cannot plan ahead for more than one turn at a time. If you really want to screw with your opponent's game boards, let's play the granddaddy of chaos spells of the format, only trumped by a couple others that are in the format, Warp World. This thing, in essence, chaos warps everybody's board back into their deck, and then fate gets to decide what kind of board states are going to be remaining for you and your opponents when this thing finishes resolving. A couple late additions to this party. We also have 1,000 Year Storm, which allows you to copy your spells and churn through things a little bit quicker as you're getting Neera off the ground, because every spell you put under the deck with Neera then allows you to copy an additional spell storm layer. And speaking of storm and chaos effects, we have Mind's Desire, which is also kind of a similar thing, but you just randomly flip cards off your deck and it builds up off of a storm count for each one you do that with. If you want to go maximum chaos, then I would suggest putting Arjun the Shifting Flame and Mind Moil into the deck, giving you the ability to churn your entire hand for every spell you cast, because as soon as you cast a spell, it's going to go on the bottom and you draw a new hand every single time. And then the last card that I didn't think of originally as I was going through my stuff, but just thought of now, is Hive Mind. Hive Mind is a spell, or an enchantment I should say, that allows you and your opponents to gain a copy of whatever spells are going on. Well, there's not much more chaotic than that going on, because if you're casting something, they're going to get a copy, and anything that they cast, for instance and sorceries, you're also going to get a copy of, which completely monkey wrenches anybody's plans, because if they're like, oh, if I do this, well, if your opponents get a copy of it, it may not work out so well for you in the end. However, besides all of these chaos spells, there are two spells that are chaos spells that I will never play in a chaos deck because they are just too migraine inducing and make games drag on forever. One of them is Thieves' Auction, and the other one is Scrambleverse. Do not, under any circumstances, play these spells. People don't like you screwing with their cards, steal one thing at a time with Blatant Thievery or something like that. But if you take, half of their deck away from them, they're not going to like you for it. And sitting there trying to auction off your opponent's permanents just takes a long time and just really screws with the game. Along with all this chaos magic, we're also going to be wanting ways to trigger Neera at instant speed, because she only triggers once per turn. So what are we going to put in the deck to kind of juice this up? I would suggest a lot of cantrips or cheap burn spells such as Opt, Consider, Lightning Bolt, Play with Fire, Spectral Adversary, and March of Swirling Mists. The name of the game here is cheap spells that can double up as regular use later in the game to either keep drawing cards or to protect Neera. You're going to want something with instant speed or flash, then at the end of your opponent's turn or in response to something big that they're doing, you're going to want to respond with one of these spells and flip something big on them in surprise. So what kind of threats are we trying to randomly throw at our opponents using her ability? Well, how about some big things like dragons, such as Ancient Silver Dragon from the latest release of Commander Legends 2. It draws you cards, and it is a nice sized threat. Or Niv Mizzet the Firemind, the OG Niv Mizzet, but it could also be Niv Mizzet Perrin, depending on how you want to build the deck. Or even Drakaseth Maw of Flames. Cheating this thing out early or even as a later play is just so good because you get to blast away with his fire-breathing abilities. Or how about some really big dumb spells like Blatant Thievery? Steal your opponent's stuff and beating them with it is a lot of fun, and it's still on brand with being a chaos deck because you just completely wreck their plans if you take the right thing at the right time. Or how about Clone Legion? Copying their stuff works just as well as stealing it, and if they aren't expecting it, especially if you can do it at instant speed when they're trying to like alpha strike you or something like that, is just a ton of fun because then you copy all their creatures and block them all and kill them. It's great. Or how about Soulfire Eruption? You get to bombard the board and your opponents, and then you get to just exile the spells off the top of your deck and try to cast some more stuff into it. It just seems like good, chaotic, clean fun. I know lots of people hate chaos magic, but those people are very rigid and they don't like unpredictability in their games. They like structure, and I like kicking that structure right in the pants because I want more fun in my games. I hate people who are like, I'm going to tutor and I want consistency. Well, in my case, I prefer to go the opposite route and watch the world burn. On a final note, I understand that yes, you can build this deck to be way more competitive than a lot of the spells that I'm throwing in here, but I've seen people do videos on that. I've seen people do things that are just absolutely bustedly absurd, and if you want to go and do that, be my guest. I want to play this as a complete and utter chaos deck because I love screwing with people and the game states. If you want to play CEDH with this, go for it. So what do you think? Am I missing anything for a good rounded chaos deck? Sound off in the comments below and let me know what you think. Ideas are appreciated because I know I didn't hit everything, and there are some things I left out because they are just too painful to play even as a chaos mage. And as always, thank you for watching and have a great day.